It might sound blasphemous, but the best thing Aaron Rodgers could do for the Chicago Bears this offseason would be to come back and play another year with the Green Bay Packers.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook. Join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk. And make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. On the show today, we look at the possible offseason outcomes for Aaron Rodgers and try and figure out what's going to be best for the Chicago Bears. You might be surprised how big of an outcome his decision could have on this Bears team this upcoming season and beyond, even before we get to this season. So we'll look at what happens if he stays in Green Bay, what happens if he retires, what happens if he's traded to the Jets, and what happens if he's traded to the Las Vegas Raiders. Those seem to be the main likeliest options of what Aaron Rodgers will decide to do once he gets out of this darkness retreat that he reportedly was starting late this week. It's supposed to be 4 days in almost complete darkness, no phones, not much outside contact, a little bit of food, access to a bathroom, and really trying to find himself spiritually and see if he's able to have more guidance on what he wants to do in his football future. He hasn't said what he wants to do and says that this will be part of that process. We don't know that he's going to come out on Monday or whenever he's done and say, yep, I know for sure what I'm going to do. But we know for sure we won't know what he's going to do until at least after this process. And as weird as it sounds, Aaron Rodgers returning to Green Bay this season would put the Packers in a worse position than if he retires or gets traded somewhere else. And that ultimately is what would be best for the Chicago Bears. Because Aaron Rodgers signed that contract extension last offseason, it moved some money around, and now he got a raise and has a fairly significant salary cap hit that's going to kick in this season on his contract, whether that's with Green Bay or somewhere else, or if he retires. And it's costing them a lot of money. And he has the Green Bay Packers in a difficult spot financially that if he stays on this roster especially, or if he retires, they're going to have to pay him a certain amount of money. And it's going to be difficult for them to then build a quality football team with that salary on the books. I believe as of right now, our friends at overthecap.com have the Green Bay Packers over the cap, projected by about $16.5 million currently over the salary cap that they would need to just use to get down to the salary cap, let alone have space and create space to bring in additional outside players and re-sign their own players. Green Bay is in this position right now where there's talk about maybe moving on from David Bakhtiari and the expense in his contract, and looking at some of the other areas on the roster where they might have to cut players, restructure players, move players into the future, and also move salary into the future, and also not be able to afford the re-signing of players like maybe Adrian Amos at safety, or Alan Lazard at wide receiver, or Robert Tonyan at tight end. They're in some really difficult financial straits, and that's with projecting Aaron Rodgers' contract currently on the books. Plus, if you have Aaron Rodgers come back, then you will go through the last season of Jordan Love's rookie contract here with, without getting a great answer on whether or not he's very good. And they're starting to approach this time where will the transition happen or will it not? Because this is Jordan Love's 4th season. Next year on his 5th-year option, next offseason, he will be a $20 million quarterback. And the Packers still don't know if he's any good. They've seen some flashes. They've seen some reasons to be encouraged, but they don't know whether he's a $20 million quarterback. And at that point, you're going to have to look at a potential contract extension for him beyond that, with still having not had him play very much. And so could they end up trading Jordan Love? That's sort of the equation, that Jordan Love has been frustrated by not being able to get much playing time and having to sit behind Aaron Rodgers. And does Aaron Rodgers coming back this season then lead them to trade Jordan Love and leave them without a long-term quarterback solution? Because that's the thing here. If Rodgers comes back, he may beat the Bears twice this season, and that's no good. That sucks. We're tired of losing to Aaron Rodgers. We all get it. I don't need to hammer that point home. But then after this season, they really don't have a great plan at quarterback if they have to go another year of starting Aaron Rodgers. And so him staying and playing in Green Bay this season might be tough to stomach for the next 12 months. But it puts the Packers in a much worse position for the following months and years after that point, because they won't be able to fully move on and won't be able to fully make that quarterback transition before having to make that quarterback decision on Jordan Love, potentially having to trade him and not have a quarterback at all, or being stuck with and having to roll with or re-sign Jordan Love to some kind of long-term contract without knowing if he's any good. At least if he retires, they get a shot at seeing Jordan Love, but he's still going to count, $40 million against the salary cap unless he is going to renegotiate his contract or take a pay cut or make some sort of change to clear up some of the salary cap space for him. Everything that doesn't involve an Aaron Rodgers trade puts the Packers in a difficult financial situation, which makes life easier and better for the Chicago Bears over the long term, even if maybe in the short term you have to deal with 2 more games of playing against Aaron Rodgers. So that's why it feels like that's the best case scenario for the Chicago Bears. It gets worse to varying degrees if they trade him. Up next, we'll explain why more than anything else, if Aaron Rodgers gets traded, say, to the New York Jets, it's going to be really just annoying for Chicago Bears fans and for the team in general. Keep it locked right here on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is presented by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers at FanDuel get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's free money back into your account to place more bets in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use for all of your sports betting needs. They've got football futures. You can bet on next season and the NFL draft as well. Plus, we're right in the middle of the NBA season. Baseball season is around the corner as well, and FanDuel's got all of your sports betting needs covered. And if you want to combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout, they've got same-game parlays as well if you really want to get in on all the fun. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NFL and NBA. If the Green Bay Packers trade Aaron Rodgers to the New York Jets, first of all, the Packers get in a better position long-term and add some better players in the short term. And we have to deal with Aaron Rodgers in that New York media spotlight for at least a whole season, if not multiple seasons. And I just feel like that's going to get really annoying over time. And we went through this with Brett Favre not long ago, watching him go from Green Bay to New York. And it was annoying for Packers fans too, but it's just such a national spotlight and such a scrutiny spotlight where you're going to hear so much more about Aaron Rodgers more often on ESPN's talk programming, on their debate shows. You're going to hear about him more on national NFL pregame shows, even before Bears games. They're going to be talking about the biggest storylines in the league. That's going to be Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets, and Aaron Rodgers this and Aaron Rodgers that, and New York media critical of Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers generally being a fairly sensitive guy. I hope that we don't get to the same level of issues that Brett Favre had in New York. I believe those were the times when he got in trouble for sending images of inappropriate images. We'll leave it there, to a female staff member of the New York Jets, and really was a lot of the beginning of the downfall of Brett Favre's image that has deteriorated further and further as his career has ended, and now he's suing the Pat McAfee show for defamation, and it's just a mess. And it is funny that we've also seen Aaron Rodgers' image deteriorate while still playing in the league, with some of the COVID vaccine stuff and I'm immunized, I'm not vaccinated, and then some of the spirituality stuff. And I don't want to pile on Aaron Rodgers in that regard. He's a man who's on a personal growth journey, and I respect that, even if I might disagree with going into a dark room for 4 days. He's life is more than football for him, and he's looking for life's big answers that are beyond football. And all of us are on that sort of journey. So I do have sympathy for him in that regard. But it's going to be annoying when so much more of the spotlight is on him when he plays, if he were to play with the New York Jets in a bigger market, with more of that scrutiny and more of that attention coming his way. It also puts him on a team that looks to be in a much better position to compete for the playoffs and the Super Bowl than what he would have in Green Bay. And I don't think you're going to find any Bears fan that wants to see Aaron Rodgers certainly win a championship with any team, whether it's the Packers or another team, let alone just be in that conversation and be in that big-time championship game playoff push, with a really good AFC conference with the Bills and the Bengals and the Chiefs would kind of be maybe the big four there. I mean, the Jets have a pretty darn strong defense and a decent, maybe even above average supporting cast around the quarterback, with a couple of good young wide receivers and a good young running back, and an offensive line that has gotten better over time. It's not perfect, but Rodgers would add such a boost to that team, where there was times this season where it felt like the New York Jets were close to being like a quarterback away, and Rodgers can be that true quarterback away. And that would be annoying to watch him go be successful with that team. Just like we saw Brett Favre take those Jets teams to the playoffs. They didn't go far in the playoffs, but still, it's like, okay, yeah, he goes and continues to have more success on that other side, and we would kind of get sick of hearing about that. But then also, trading Aaron Rodgers to the Jets would likely require some contract negotiating with Rodgers, would reduce the dead salary cap space the Green Bay Packers would have. So that would clear up some of their cap space issues and allow them to build a stronger team around Jordan Love, build up more of a better supporting cast, and get out of some of their salary cap issues that they've been dealing with as they've tried to placate Aaron Rodgers, over the last couple of seasons there. Plus, they're going to get assets back in return from the New York Jets. Trying to really isolate Rodgers' trade value is difficult because he's a Hall of Fame quarterback and he still plays at a pretty darn high level, but he's also 39, and you're not sure if you're going to get more than one season from him. It's kind of year by year at this point. So the consensus we see out there is first-round pick plus something else, but how much else and what that looks like is a little bit iffy there. The Jets have the 13th overall pick, so presumably that could be the spot that the Packers then acquire to get a pretty high first-round pick that could be an offensive tackle replacement for David Bakhtiari or another big pass rusher for them, or anything that could fill their needs. Packers fans have daydreamed about being able to get a good young player in return in that deal. I don't know exactly what caliber of player. They're not getting Garrett Wilson or Jermaine Johnson plus the Jets' first-round pick, but Denzel Mims, the Quinnen Williams, I think, has been thrown out there as a possibility. I mean, even that feels like a little bit much for me, but desperate teams, desperate for a Super Bowl winning quarterback, a Hall of Fame quarterback on a team that feels like it's maybe a quarterback away, that has that quarterback's offensive coordinator kind of handpicked for him, who's supposed to be one of his good friends. Maybe they would be a team that's willing to give up more than you think Aaron Rodgers is worth at this stage of his career, especially if there's at least one other team also in the trade bidding war for Aaron Rodgers, potentially in the form of the Las Vegas Raiders. So coming up next, find out why Aaron Rodgers going to the Las Vegas Raiders feels like out of all of these scenarios would be the worst case for the Chicago Bears. That's next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by our friends at Ultimate Pro Football GM. It's a fun mobile app that puts you in complete control of your franchise. You might have an aging veteran quarterback on your Ultimate Football GM franchise, and you have to decide, do you keep rolling with him? Do you release him and save the salary cap money? Or do you trade him to another team, try and get some assets and rebuild around a future quarterback? You can be in that exact situation, minus the 4-day darkness retreat and ayahuasca trips with the Ultimate Pro Football GM app. Unfortunately, ayahuasca is not built into their challenging and realistic game world, but they do let you do every other aspect of team coordination, hiring coaches and coordinators, free agent signings, salary cap, contract extensions, NFL draft trades, and picking the players, and setting ticket prices, and working with sponsors. Anything you can think of, Ultimate Football GM has in place, and it's completely free and playable offline, so you can play on the go as you want, whenever you want to. Locked On Bears listeners will get a 100% free boost to your franchise when you use our promo code LOCKEDON in the game store. That's all caps, Locked On, inside the game store, so make sure to check it out today. To download the free game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. No one's going to start a dynasty with Aaron Rodgers at this stage of his career, but as we see the Packers dynasty potentially end, you worry about how that can affect your Chicago Bears. And if the Packers trade Aaron Rodgers to the Las Vegas Raiders, not only do the Packers get better in some of the same ways we talked about for the Jets, not only do the Raiders get better, but that also eliminates another potential trade partner for the Chicago Bears to move up for a quarterback in the NFL draft. We went through some of these quarterback scenarios on a podcast earlier this week, or was it last week already? The days nowadays blend together. But recently on the podcast, we talked about the veteran quarterback market, not really a lot about Rodgers, but Derek Carr being released from the Raiders and where other quarterbacks available this offseason might land and how that would affect the Bears' ability to have a robust trade market to try and get up to the number one overall pick to give the Bears as much back as possible. Just like the Packers want to have multiple suitors, maybe trading for Aaron Rodgers, the Bears want multiple suitors trading up for the number one overall pick. And one of those potential teams is the Las Vegas Raiders, drafting with that 7th overall pick. It's a prime spot to be able to move up and to secure a quarterback of the future for them. But if they trade for Aaron Rodgers instead, A, they might send that 7th overall pick to the Green Bay Packers, which would help them. But B, they're not going to be in a position to move up. They're sticking with Rodgers and trying to win now and not going to draft a quarterback then early in this 2023 draft class and not going to be a member of the bidding war to trade up for that Bears number one overall pick. And you have the Las Vegas Raiders on the Chicago Bears schedule this season, which means if Aaron Rodgers was traded to the Raiders, you would still have to pay to play Aaron Rodgers this season. And you wouldn't even get the escape of not having to deal with him anymore on the schedule. At least it would be one game instead of two, but that's going to be annoying, especially when he's reunited with Devontae Adams. We've seen the two of them have big games against the Chicago Bears many times over the years. Maybe you look at the Raiders team as a whole as not as potentially scary overall. I think it depends on what they give up to get Aaron Rodgers, because Packers fans, we keep coming up with these trade scenarios where it's like the Raiders trade the 7th overall pick and Darren Waller to the Green Bay Packers for Aaron Rodgers, which again feels like way too much to give up for a 39-year-old quarterback, a really good 39-year-old quarterback, but maybe 1 year, maybe 2 years of Aaron Rodgers, and you're going to give up one of the best young tight ends in football. He's not that young anymore, but still, he's one of these difference makers at the tight end position. He's actually 30 years old now, so he's not young, but he's he's one of these guys that can be a 1,000-yard type skill set at that position, which would be huge for Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers, would be a great weapon for them, would deteriorate some of Rodgers' supporting cast with the Raiders, but he's likely still going to have Devontae Adams if he ends up on the Raiders, and that's almost everything that he needs at this stage of his career. But part of the optimism that Packers fans put on that is that there were reports maybe that the new GM in Las Vegas might be more willing to move on from some of those guys from the previous regime, the Hunter Renfros, the Colton Millers, the Darren Wallers, and the Josh Jacobses of the world, that they might want to get more of their guys in and not some of these other types of players that have been there, despite those guys being very good and very talented. I still don't think the Packers can really get all that for Aaron Rodgers, but you never know, man. He's really good. And again, if the Jets are bidding and the Raiders are bidding and the Raiders can say better draft pick and better player that we're pairing together, or maybe just multiple better draft picks, then, maybe they get a little desperate and have to make that type of move. So the Packers would then get better by adding that player and that pick, shedding that salary, and being able to build a better team around Jordan Love and really seeing what Jordan Love can do late here in his rookie contract before having to decide what he would do. The Raiders would get better at the quarterback position, would have, a Devontae Adams connection back with Rodgers and presumably be in that playoff push, and they would play the Bears on the schedule. It just feels like all around, you're taking away a trade partner, you're taking away a potential number one overall pick bidder, you're getting a better deal for the Packers financially and for the long-term future, and you still have to play Rodgers and have a decent set of weapons and team around him in that process. That would suck. That would be annoying. And I least want to see Aaron Rodgers traded to the Las Vegas Raiders. The Jets, okay, fine, I guess, but still helps Green Bay a bit by being able to get some value for Aaron Rodgers, as opposed to Aaron Rodgers finishing his career in Green Bay by either playing another year or two or retiring, hamstringing the team in the process, because he'd also want a lot of his own guys re-signed if he comes back. The Randall Cobbs of the world that he kind of requested to be brought in, that cost too much and didn't play very well, but you keep him on the team to keep Rodgers healthy. It just seems like that's the most difficult path long-term for the Green Bay Packers, is more of Aaron Rodgers finishing his career with the team. As weird as that sounds, and as much as we're tired of seeing Aaron Rodgers as the Packers quarterback, one more year of that is in the Chicago Bears' best long-term interest to truly take over the NFC North and be the new frontrunners in this division, not just next year, but for the long haul, to take that crown, take that reins, and be the team that everyone else has to beat, the same way the Packers have been for the last 2 decades with these quarterbacks under center here. We can take one more year of a Hall of Fame quarterback in Green Bay if it means a more difficult path towards success beyond that one more year. So that's why it feels weird to make the case for keeping Rodgers in Green Bay, but it is a better outcome than trading him to the Raiders, and likely a better outcome than even trading him to the New York Jets. If there's a big Aaron Rodgers ripple, you can be sure we'll break down how it affects your Chicago Bears right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button wherever you listen to podcasts, and of course on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, because those are going to be the best ways to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. If you're looking for your second listen, check out all of our other Locked On podcasts here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. We've got Locked On Bulls, breaking down Chicago at the All-Star break. Russell Westbrook rumors, trying to get him into that team that's blown way too many big leads this season. Locked On Cubs, Locked On White Sox in off-season mode. Locked On Blackhawks in the thick of the NHL season. And, of course, our college podcast, we've got Locked On Illini and Northwestern, I believe, are the main Illinois-based podcasts. But even if you're fans of teams outside of the state, go check out our Locked On podcast for your team every day. Make sure you come on back tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Bears and another opportunity to bear down.